Hi, everyone. Thank you so much once again for joining us for this Drawdown Georgia climate interview series. I'm really excited to talk to someone who I've known for quite some time in the work. This is Stacey Isaac Berahzer, and Stacey is going to talk to us today about the work that she's been doing in DeKalb County with 100% clean energy. So thank you so much, Stacey, for joining us and for being with us today. I'm so glad to get a chance to chat with you.
Oh, it's my pleasure. And it's good to see you again.
It's always good to see you. I'd love to start letting you introduce yourself to our audience and tell us about what you brought you to a career in equity and environmental issues.
Sure. I think, like most people, Erica, I did not plan to be exactly where I am today in terms of what I do. So, in high school, like probably you and several other folks in the field, I decided I wanted to do environmental work for my career. So, I pursued a degree in environmental science. And while I was doing that degree, I kind of felt like, a lot of the science is here. We know some of this stuff. We
Mhm.
know certain chemicals are bad for the environment. We know that certain practices are not good in terms of farming or industry, etc. But I felt like some things weren't changing because of laws and policies. So I was going to go to law school, be an environmental lawyer. And then I changed my mind between undergrad and grad school. And I was like, you know what? It's about the money. So if we can find the money to do bona fide, good, robust environmental projects, then they'll happen, right? But
Right.
if the money isn't there, the financing mechanism isn't there, then some projects never happen. And so that's kind of how I ended up in finance, like how you pay for it. And a lot of times raising the money for water energy projects means that the customers, the citizens have to pay more. And so a lot of what we do at IB Environmental has evolved into being, how do we protect those lowest income, most vulnerable customers? So on the one side, we're raising money with the finance, and on the other side, we're taking care of the low income folks who genuinely have a problem paying these higher bills and rates.
Thank you so much for that. Most of the folks that I've talked to and that they've introduced themselves on this show have unconventional ways in which they got to this. So I love
Mhm.
hearing that and love our audience to hear that. Certainly, I've talked about it on the show as well. You talked about your firm, IB Environmentals, and that your firm was a part of one of the partner organizations behind the development of the DeKalb County 100% clean energy and transportation transition plan, which is so exciting, especially for myself as someone who is a resident of DeKalb County and has been for some years now. Can you give us an overview generally of how the plans came together and what were the primary goals and how the county plans on achieving those?
Yeah, that's a great question. So basically, to give the county credit, this whole thing started up issuing a request for proposals, right? A few years ago, an
Oh, okay.
RFP. And so they wanted to do this. They were just looking for the right team of consultants to do it. And so that's how it started. The county initiated it. South Face Institute
Mm-hmm.
wanted to go after this. They just went down a list of certified local small businesses that were certified with DeKalb County as local small businesses, and we happen to be one of them. And so, credit to Sumner Pomeroy from South Face. She's just going down that list, calling all the local businesses to see if they worked on this kind of stuff. I was like, yes, we do. We at IB Environmental work on water, equity, energy, affordability, right? So that's how we got involved with the project. Besides South Face at IB Environmental, there's Energetics, which is based in the Maryland area, and Cherry Street Energy. So yeah, we came together as a team. We, kind of divide to conquer, if you will. South Face and IB Environmental as the most local, and Cherry Street as well. But the two of us, South Face and IB Environmental, worked on outreach to the community. So we had this pretty fulfilling piece of work to have community residents like yourself from DeKalb County come into the library. We had it at a community college too, and we teach them stuff about their energy bill and the utility that
Mm-hmm.
serves them. So we did 4 workshops like that. South Face handled the ones on weatherization and energy efficiency, etc. And when we came in at IB Environmental, we really led the content on the one where bring your electric utility bill to the workshop. We broke it down. We helped There were a lot of senior citizens in the room. That was pretty cool to help them tap into. Some of them didn't know that there were programs by Georgia Power and other electric utilities that they can tap into as senior citizens, or different efficiency programs. So we really enjoyed connecting the dots there with what utilities or local governments may have, assistance programs basically out there that the residents didn't know about. So that was a big piece of the work. And, we let these folks know that this plan was coming. We got their input. So I think I really like that interactive process where the stakeholders of the community would get to give some input on what was going to be in this plan. And so, we had another, Energetics was leading the greenhouse gas emission stuff with some support from IB Environmental. Cherry Street was doing a lot of the rooftop solar capability, but it really started with the initiative by the county to seek a team to do this work.
I love that. And I had been familiar before with DeKalb County's want to be more environmentally conscious in general, both Decatur as a county seat, but also the county in general. And so I'm really glad that they were proactive about seeking out help to get this done. Yeah. What role exactly did IB International or IB Environmental play in developing the plan?
Sure. So we did help with these 4 engagements, hands-on community events. The first couple, I was just facilitating. I'm not your person when it comes to exactly how you do weatherization and put the strips in and all that, but South Face was. So we were at that and we just kind of helped, literally I was helping take questions and facilitate and that kind of thing. But we really led the content when it came to the financing, the bill structure, the options for assistance and that kind of thing. And that's our role in the project at IB Environmental, centered around the equity piece. We definitely supported the greenhouse gas emissions inventory just because that company too was not really based in Georgia, the one that was leading the inventory. So we had a lot of local contacts. One of the major contact was the folks who work on Drawdown, Georgia. When the greenhouse gas emission team needed information, I was like, well, we're not going to reinvent this wheel. Let me tell you about Drawdown, Georgia. And so we kind of made those connections. We had professors who work on Drawdown, Georgia, very willing to talk to the team and help answer some of the more technical questions about greenhouse gas emissions. And so that was one of the roles that we played as a local presence, along with South Base, of course, to kind of introduce our partners from Energetics to the local resources. So the Metro North Georgia Water Planning District and the Atlanta Regional Commission, they have some of this stuff, or at least we wanted to make sure that they had some of the stuff before we went and reinvented the wheel. Drawdown Georgia staff was really helpful in ground setting so that we knew where we were starting.
Fantastic. And you're mentioning some names that folks have mentioned on this show before with ARC and of course Drawdown and other businesses and stakeholders. So we're always trying to make the connections of the ways in which all of these different stakeholders fold into the work that folks are doing.
Exactly, Eriqah. Like, why reinvent the wheel, right? If there's a group out there that may have some data or they have a model, they work with another county next door, we really try to not reinvent that wheel and leverage the resources and the knowledge that already exist. But then a major role for us to like our, each of these different tasks had a lead, right? And we were supporting several of them. But our task that IB Environmental was the lead on was the equity piece of it. So again, kudos to the county for saying they wanted equity to be a big part of this work. And that's our thing, right? We did some mapping of the lowest income areas of DeKalb County. And we call it's a model that we have for mapping called Pockets of Poverty. And I think that name is pretty descriptive. You take the entire county and then you break it down into the census tracts. That's what our model does. And there are different ways to measure socioeconomic distress, financial distress. You'll be able to see some of these in the maps in a moment here. But what we did is we showed where the darkest red areas were, where the county needed to do the most work because there was the most financial distress. So we took the average energy bill or electricity bill for DeKalb County, and we divided it by the typical income for different census tracts. And you can clearly see, and it was in some ways not a huge surprise. Like you, Eriqah, if you live in DeKalb, you have a kind of sense of where the lowest income places are in the county, but it's nice to have data and a visual, a map to show these are where they are. So we tried to have some of our workshops and engagements in some of these areas. We also encourage the county and, like Georgia Power, the utilities, when they do outreach on their assistance programs, like their financial assistance programs or efficiency assistance programs, to focus on these lower income areas that are having the highest energy burden. So those maps hopefully help point that out. And that was really our major role. That's the part of the project that we led, that affordability equity piece.
Yeah. Yes, you're absolutely right. I'm very familiar with where some of those pockets are, having been a DeKalb County resident for a few years now. I can imagine where you all have had some of those conversations. To your point that you were mentioning earlier about, why are we reinventing the wheel? Partners that already have some of this data, having that quantitative data with the qualitative data of talking to the residents is really how authentic engagement happens, right? That's how like authentic, non-extractive, non-exploitative engagement happens. So that's really great that you all were like marrying those different ways in which to gather information. I'm interested to know, what did you learn about DeKalb County as you were pulling the plan together, and what recommendations did you make to the team based on those lessons?
Okay, yeah, we learned quite a bit. And again, DeKalb has been progressive in that, for example, the landfills in the county, they've been harnessing some of those gases from the landfill and reusing it. DeKalb has also been trying to change out its fleet to more electric vehicles with time. So what this did was really quantify and kind of created more of, I think, a specific roadmap for the county with some of their initiatives. So, and then, it's one thing, like you were saying, Eric, it's one thing to feel like something might not be affordable. One thing to feel like, energy might be expensive based on people's income in DeKalb County. And while there's a place for feelings, right, we like to put some numbers to it, some data. And so these maps really underscored where the burden was. And just with a typical bill, right, a typical electricity bill and gas bill for the Southeast, there were clearly areas that are experiencing more burden than other parts of the county. And I think that was really important to highlight and just like create that visual based on data. So the energy burden part is a lot of what IB Environmental did for the project. We also sort of highlighted what the county had been doing already, and so they can kind of continue on that path. We made some suggestions too about how the whole structure in terms of the governance structure of the county could be maybe tweaked to facilitate somebody pretty high up being able to move some parts of this plan forward. So I would say in a lot of ways, it's not super groundbreaking suggestions that came out in some ways in the plan, but will we be able to move it forward? What governance structures can we put in place so that these things get their day in the sun and then they keep front and center for the county? So that was one of the interesting things too. And besides county, like a position, a sustainability officer being pretty high up in the county, that's one way we suggested. We really think too that they should continue. One of the things in the plan, one of the recommendations like you were asking for, is that there's a citizen cohort that's going to be continuously engaged in the future. So we think that's a really important factor too, that the county needs to continue in order to get these things from plan on paper into reality. So those are some of the biggest takeaways, I think.
That's great. I love to hear also about the cohort of citizens that are continuing to keep their eye on the plan as well. That's great. Based on those lessons, what are some of the biggest challenges that you foresee in achieving 100% clean energy in DeKalb County? DeKalb County is certainly one of the most populous counties in the metro, but probably in the state as well. And so what are the challenges that you see with a county that's so big, so many cities, so many different areas and socioeconomic statuses? And how can those challenges be overcome, do you think?
Yeah, it's a really good question. And I try to take a positive approach to this kind of stuff. So there are more challenges right now than there were even a few months ago. So I would say a challenge is some of the funding sources that the county could have probably tapped into and are very questionable right now. So that's unfortunate. But I'm also thinking we'll get past that as a society. Things will settle down a little bit, I'm hoping, in terms of the financing options, right, from the federal government anyway. One of my mantras, if you will, is that if a project can only happen because of free money or a grant, then there's a problem there. So I'm really focused on environmental sustainability, but what about financial sustainability, right? So there are
Mhm.
cases when there's a natural disaster, there's a hurricane or something where we do want federal money or even state grant money or whatever to come into play. There are
Right.
also cases where we're doing a pilot, somebody has to be the trailblazer. Let's try this out and see how it works. And that's a great place for grant funds too. But we need to develop sustainable financing mechanisms. So that's what's really going to, move things forward. What I'm also hopeful about, so yes, while it's a very populous county, that's actually a positive thing, right? That's a pro on advantage. With a lot of people contributing and making a difference in small ways in their own lives, it's going to make a big change in the long run. So I think that gives me hope as well. And the young people give me hope. Like, it's pretty cool to see in the workshops, we had some younger folks come. They are really invested in this. I mean, the
Mhm.
city is running a program right now with the Youth Climate Action Fund. And these
Mhm.
16, is it 15 to 24-year-olds, are coming up with projects at that tender age that they are trying to address clean energy issues and the energy transition. So the youth give me a lot of hope too. I know that's a group that you work with a lot, Eric, and have a lot of experience
Mhm.
with. I really appreciate all that you've done in that area, but that's where I think a lot of the change is going to come from. And I'm very hopeful because of their engagement and their skills and their expertise, even at this young age.
Fantastic. Yeah, there's certainly a surgence of young folks that are really interested, not only in environmental sustainability and EJ from a macro perspective,
Mhm.
but just how to change things in their own neighborhoods and how they can be, the most beneficial to their own neighborhoods. So I'm
Right.
glad to
Yeah.
hear. Um,
Hmm.
I'm glad to hear that they were engaged in your workshops. With all that you all have done when it comes to this plan and all that the county is, I guess, banking on doing, regardless of the challenges that we're facing politically and socially right now, what does success look like in your work, both with this plan, but also in general? Like, what do you see as success in your work?
Yeah, I think it's the community involvement as well. So that's why I think like these hands-on workshops for community members so that they understand their energy bill, they understand how energy utility works, they
Mhm.
understand the Public Service Commission in Georgia. We had actually, I mentioned 4 of these engagement efforts, and session 3 was on reading your bill and how an electric utility works. We actually had folks from the energy utilities come in and talk and answer questions from the residents. So I think engaging them is super important. The 4th workshop for the citizens was really about the Public Service Commission in Georgia and how decisions, especially with Georgia Power being the largest energy utility or electric utility in the state, how
Mhm.
that particular organization is governed and regulated, really is a better word. So I think that's really important. Folks really had their eyes opened a lot on a lot of those slides that we were going through. So that's really important, I think. And like I mentioned before, there's going to be a county group that's going to be continuing, but I think we called it Community Climate Champions Cohort. So we
Mhm.
tried to hold the C's in there, 4 C's.
Mhm.
But that's the group that we're recommending continue to work. So that's pretty generally what I think is going to help this project in particular. But for success in the work that we do, I would say, what does it look like? Maybe the bill burdens would not go down. So on the maps, we won't get rid of all of those really dark areas or pockets where there's a lot of financial stress on the customers who live in that area or the citizens. But
Right.
bill burdens don't go down, and there are ways that it could, right? I mean, electricity rates could go down, that's one. But
Right.
then
Right.
efficiency would also mean that you're not using as much energy, so your bill will go down, right? But maybe bills don't go down. It's very uncommon for utility rates to go down, let's face it, water or energy. But success looks to us like more people who truly face a financial hardship can be, one, identified, so we can find those folks who really have genuine financial hardship, and we're able to put them in touch with resources to alleviate their financial distress. So there are programs out there, maybe we need to beef them up for the genuinely low income folks to be able to access those resources. That's what success looks like from the types of work that IB Environmental does. And when I say alleviation, but sometimes, simply assisting a household with energy efficiency measures, like the work that Southface does a lot, something like insulation, for instance, can lower the
Yeah.
bill to the point that the customer, the household, doesn't need financial assistance anymore. They can
Mhm.
suddenly afford this bill that's now lower because they don't have as much energy wastage, if you will, because we're conserving the natural resource and we're also helping the customer financially. So
Yeah.
that's what success looks like to us. So that this multi-pronged approach with identifying and helping customers with their financial needs, but also helping them with their energy conservation and efficiency needs. Solar for all, also, we would like to
Yeah.
see more low income folks have access to solar. And there are a couple of financial models, financial managerial models out there that we're watching closely and kind of working along with. That's also success to me and to IB Environmental, because it's kind of, I have a problem with saying the lowest income customers just need to insulate and weatherize their house, and higher income customers are the only ones who have access to solar panels, for instance, or solar panel installation on their homes, right? We
Mhm.
need to kind of, that just seems like it doesn't seem very equitable, right?
Right.
So I'm very happy to be tracking the models out there and contributing to some of them where we have this concept of solar for all, or we're working towards that, and generally renewable energy sources overall. So
Yeah.
that's what I think success looks like.
Thank you for that. I think that's so poignant what you said about, the energy efficiency standpoint, being the lowest hanging fruit of how to bring people's bills down, even if the rates themselves don't come down. I
Mhm.
don't know if you mentioned this before, but I feel like folks might be interested in knowing, with this DeKalb County 100% clean energy and transportation transition plan, is there a year goal? I mean, I know a lot of us are putting year goals like 2030, 2025 used to be the goal, and now here we are. Is there a year goal for the county as far as like when they want to be at 100% clean energy? Or
We need some sort of benchmark towards, or a goal to be
right,
aiming towards. Otherwise, we will end up nowhere, right?
right,
So yes, 2030. I think it's mentioned in this report like 40 times, if not more.
okay,
So yeah, that's the goal. That most of the initiatives, that's what they have in mind for this transition and this clean energy,
okay, great. So on par with a lot of the other plans that we see in
right?
state and in the country in general. Fantastic. Well,
Yeah,
this
for
has
sure.
been
That wasn't completely coincidental, right? We're kind of
right.
like, we're looking around, like I said, and the Drawdown Georgia folks were really helpful with that too, with kind of seeing what's out there, what are our cohort communities doing.
Right. And what do you think about that goal overall for the state? And I know you work not just in Georgia, but in other states in the Southeast about the 2030 goal. I've been curious to ask the folks I know that are doing some of this, are keeping their eyes on these transition plans, especially in the Southeast. What are your thoughts on where we are with that? Once upon a time when we first started saying 2030, that was like 10, 15 years from now. It's
Right.
5 so I'm just curious what your thoughts are on that benchmark. Some people, like, I've heard 2040 here and there, but I feel like folks don't really want to kick the can that far down the road. So I'm just curious what your thoughts are as someone who kind of has seen that in some of the work that you've done with IB Environmental and in some of your other work.
Yeah, it's an important question. I think 2030 sounded realistic 15 years ago, right? It's good to be ambitious. It's good to be proactive. I do think we might see some of those goals slip to a little bit further, but I hesitate to say let's kick the can down. Let's give it a try, but it is 5 years from
Yeah,
now. And one of the things that gives me hope too, that we can probably meet, if we meet these goals for 2030, not just DeKalb, but some of the other communities that are putting that out there, it's because of what's referred to as leapfrog technology. So I think two things give us a lot of hope, right? Education. So while I focus on the finance, how you pay for it, the finance is going to come from people, whether they're going to pay more
yeah,
on their bills, whether they're going to invest in solar panels, whether they're going to
right.
vote for leaders who are going to stress renewable energy. So education is super important, which is why we really like doing those hands-on things, right?
Yeah,
Education of older folks is important, but the young people, again, I think they are really getting it and they're gung-ho. The other thing, besides education, and sort of education almost generates political will, because if people, the citizens, the voters, know the importance of certain things related to climate change, then they will demand that their leaders address these at the polls. So that's an important piece of it. But leapfrog technology, and I'm sure most of your audience is familiar with that term, but one of the things that I'd gone to. I think Al Gore was talking in Atlanta a few years ago for the climate reality sessions. He was here for a couple of days. And one of the amazing things was, when you think about cell phones, for instance, right? If we had to get a landline in every home across the world, that would be, at one point we would say that's impossible, or it would take like 200 years or something, right? But we've leapfrogged over that. There are women in India who are walking from their house to the village well every day, and it takes them a couple hours in one way, a couple hours back. They're talking on their cell phones the whole way, right? So they don't have water in their house, but they're connected via their cell phones. So that is an example of leapfrog technology. On the energy side, maybe we're not going to achieve electrification of all of the small villages in India or Africa, but I've seen on thatched houses, tiny huts with a thatched roof, a solar panel, and a kid doing their homework by that one bulb. That's that those things are what give me hope. We're going to make it because of leapfrog technology and just a more educated and engaged citizenry. I think that's what's going to cause the 2030. Maybe we'll slip a little bit further than that, but I think that's what's really going to bring us where we need to be.
I love that. I love those analogies you brought in. That's so poignant and insightful. You talked a lot about hope, and that's my favorite question. It's the last question of our interview. I'd love to know if you have anything more to add. What is giving you hope around climate and the environment in Georgia? If you have anything more to add specifically for our state.
Yeah, I think Drawdown Georgia is a great resource because it's taken this sort of national effort or framework and brought it locally to our state, right? And so that I don't do the science as much anymore. I'm not an engineer. If they say those are good practices, I'll figure out how to pay for them, right? That's what we try to do. So I think initiatives like that, and especially now to the private philanthropy, I think, is playing a really important role and will have to play an even more important role in the next few years. And so that gives me hope. But yeah, to reiterate some of the things, because I know that's one of your favorite questions, and I've been hearing it throughout the questions in the interview today. The young people and the leapfrog technology, and then just an engaged, educated citizenry that will demand changes, demand that we don't stick with status quo. I think that's we have a tall order, and I'm not your glass half full kind of girl, right? I mean, I'm kind of realistic and sometimes even, considered to be pessimistic, but we have to get there. And I do think with some of these tools, I think we'll get there.
Thank you so much, Stacey. Again, it's always nice to speak with you. It's always good to see you. And thank you for bringing this to the forefront. I'm sure there's folks that had no idea about DeKalb County's dedication to this plan. And so I appreciate you as a DeKalb County resident, but also as somebody who does this work, to be a part of bringing this transition plan to our county and hopefully being an example to the surrounding metro as well and the state in general. So thank you so much for your work there. And thank you for coming on today to talk about it. I appreciate you.
Great. Thank you so much, Eriqah, for the opportunity. I love talking to you as usual. And it was really good to have this opportunity to highlight some of the work that the other team members did too. DeKalb was great to work with. So thank you so much for having me. And yeah, check out the plan. Definitely there are pieces that are adoptable by other local governments in the metro area.
And we'll make sure that we have for our audience a way for you to look at the plan and get some ideas for your own neighborhood and your own county. And hopefully you're as involved as you can be to bring these things to the forefront. We look forward to seeing you all next time for our next interview. Thank you all so much for being here once again for our interview series. We'll see you all next time. Thanks, Stacey. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, Eriqah. Bye.